Hello, all you laser enthusiasts. Today I want to talk about adding value to your existing laser business. So, I, doing laser engraving and stuff like that, you always get these questions about it, like, can you add color, for example? I get that a lot, right? And I say, no, it's basically the laser is burning wood, so it's darkening the wood, and that's how you get those contrasts or how you get an engrave, or it could be in metal or whatever you're doing. Now there are some UV or other type of lasers that can do some color variations, but typically it doesn't print color in a sense. So in order to add that value, I've seen other years ago. I saw other laser engravers and people that do personalization. And one of the things I saw was UV printer. So it was I think this business, they had a UV printer. They had what they said was fairly cheap one, which was, I think it was like $10,000 or something like that. And, they had different issues with it, but it worked somewhat. But I saw the potential there. I thought it was really cool, right? And I thought someday I want to have something like that because I want to be able to add, color to wood or to acrylic or whatever, because I saw some potentials and I had some ideas of what I could do. Now, circa a few years later, I mean last year basically, a new product came out, which was the Eufy Make E1. So that was the first, I guess they would call it a consumer, desktop, whatever, UV printer. So it was on Kickstarter. I did do the Kickstarter, and now I have that. So I'm going to talk a little bit with that, but primarily you could use other UV printers. There's some others coming out that will be more in the reasonable range of cost and be easy to use for a consumer or for a small business. And that's really what I'm talking about, is adding it onto your small business of laser engraving, because those big machines are expensive and require a lot of work. So we'll dive into a little bit, but I primarily want to talk about how to incorporate it in, and I've done a few things before, and I'll just show you real quick these things, right? So I had done ornaments in the past with lasers, right? So I'm just showing you the back side of this so far, and then it was engraved originally with the laser, but I wanted to add color, so with the UV printer you can see the color that was added. Hopefully it focuses. So that was really cool. And then, making like magnets and stuff, where I took Baltic birch that I had cut, and instead of, doing engraved, now I can do full color. So it's really cool. And I did like name badges before. This is myself, and I had done it with the laser, but I added now a UV color with my logo of my business. So that made it a lot easier to use. So with that, it makes everything much easier for to do. So today, though, I want to really talk about doing print and cut. Now, you may have seen I had some previous videos about print and cut in LightBurn, and it's a really cool tool. And I see a lot of people using these UV printers, but they're not doing print and cut. Usually they're cutting it out first. So like I said, in this example, this was cut out first actually, and then printed on. So you have to try and line everything up and get it to work, right? To get it all to look well. Where the opposite you can do, where you use the UV printer to print on your substrate and then use your laser to cut it out. So we're going to do that with some hat patches. Some very simple hat patches. We're going to do a circular, but it's very simple, and I'll show that in LightBurn. Then in the Eufy Make application, the Eufy Make Studio they use, and then we'll cut it out and laser. We'll print it, and then we'll do the cut and the laser, and we'll see how that comes out. But I think that comes out really well. Like I said in the past, people are not sure how good that is, how accurate that is, where I did some ornaments, boxes. And what I did there is I designed them in a program, paper. These are paper boxes. And then I brought that into LightBurn, and then I exported it basically as an SVG, brought it into Inkscape, where I was able to add my colorful images into it and print it out. And then took it into then with the registration marks, as you would call, bring it into the laser, and then I was able to then print that out, or not print that, but cut it out, and it cut it out perfectly. So I have pretty confidence in, it being cut out. Now you will have some curve issues, maybe a little bit, that you might want to adjust for. So you can do that as well to make sure it cuts super accurate, but it's pretty simple, and we'll show that today on this episode.
We are the enthusiasts, yeah, the laser enthusiasts.
Okay, so here we are in LightBurn, and what I'm going to do, I'm doing some hat patches that will be circular. So I'll start with that, hold down the shift key and get somewhere pretty close to what I'm looking for, which is 2.5. So I'm going to lock the dimension, so it should change it to be 2.5. Very simple. This is going to be very simple. Then I'm going to duplicate it because I'm just going to do 2 hat patches today on this. And, line them up. Make sure they're lined up. So very simple there. And I have some, if I can find them. There. So I have this graphic here that I'll add. And I add 2 of them. And basically you put them on either side. This, and then I'll choose that and I'll export it as an SVG, so then I'll bring that into the next program, which is the Eufy Make Studio. Now obviously you could do more depending on how many you want to do at once. Okay, I'm here in the Eufy Make Studio. I have my patch designs that I did previously. And we're going to be using white leatherette, so we won't have to use white when it comes to this. So I'll change those settings in a second. And just right now, before I load everything, I'm just going to show you a few things. So I'm going to bring in my element here, I don't know what you'd call it exactly, but the SVG that we exported out of the previous thing. So we're going to do that, and we need to adjust the size of it because when it imports it, the size might not be accurate. So I have my size from LightBurn, so I'm going to use my settings from there and adjust accordingly. Okay, I've adjusted them to what I had in LightBurn. So even if you just want to kind of see, you can pull this over and see if it will fit. And it looks like it fits perfectly. It's hard to say because this is black and all that, right? But the other thing we'll do is ungroup this. So we'll come in here and we're going to ungroup this. And the reason for that is when I print this, I don't want this line, which is fine. So we'll move this here. We'll move this here. And we can make any adjustments we want. So we need to know, so the main thing to know, right? I'm going to undo that. Is which layer is this, right? So that's the main thing. You need to know, okay, what layer is that? since we ungrouped it. Is it this layer probably? Yes. And just to show you, we move it, you can see that that's gone. So usually you can see this easily in here. There's a few ways. If we just go through, now we have it lined up, we can go through and we'll highlight the different things, the different stuff. And I know it's down. Here's that one, so it's probably the next one. So there. So now we can print this, right? So we're going to print this in CMYK, CMYK. And let me just make sure this is selected and it's set properly. It's all going to be CMYK, so I don't care. I could select it all. So it's the easiest way. Make sure it's all CMYK because we're printing on white. And what I'm going to do right now is going to do a snapshot. So I put some leatherette, white leatherette, some basically just some test piece that I'm going to use for this. And I cut it just a square out for this. So the first thing we have to do is do a snapshot. So in this, it will take a picture of it and determine the height. And one thing with the leatherette you want to do is really secure that to the bed. Now the bed has a sticky. What I did is put a piece of cardstock on top, and then I double stick tape the item, or in this case the leatherette, to the bed. So let's do the snapshot. So you will hear some noise, and you can see here, sort of, if I can get that in there a little bit, it's measuring the height. Now you want to make sure that when it measures the height and it comes out and you see it, that it's not, also I have it in inches right now, so, but I'm usually millimeters because it's easier for me to sometimes understand, because most of the stuff I buy comes in, 3 millimeters or whatever. But you want to make sure that that height is close to, within a few millimeters, 2 millimeters at the most of whatever you're doing. And the reason for that is it will not do a good job of printing. Also, there can be things that might be sticking up. Like you might have a piece of tape that's sticking up or something. So you want to make sure that that's not causing an issue. So it says 0.117 inches. So I think that's that's 3 millimeters. So it's about right. I'd say it's probably 3 millimeters at the most. Somewhere around there. So we're in good. And once it finishes taking a snapshot, then we'll be able to put this where we want it. So I may group this because I've already lined everything up. So I could always group it just for ease of use. Of moving it around just in case. Because I don't want these things to move in different positions and then it won't work when we bring it into the laser, so it won't cut it out accurately if we don't have things lined up the way they're supposed to. So we're going to do that as I did group, and we're still waiting for the snapshot to finish. Okay, the snapshot's finished, and it's loaded right here. For this, we don't really need much in the way of lineup, but make sure something like that. Make sure our opacity is 100%. And the other thing is we can do quality either standard or we can do high quality. So those all depend on a few things. High quality will come out a little bit better. And it all depends on what you like. I use mostly standard because I've done a lot of stuff comes out well on standard, and it uses less ink, I would say, than doing high quality. If it's a smaller, you can do high quality. Whether you want to do gloss, I did CMYK only, Whether you want to do gloss, that's another thing. And I mostly don't use gloss. Gloss can be more protective, but it also makes it very shiny. So it all depends on what you like. It's not a matte gloss, it's a shiny gloss. So we'll just do that. When we go to the print, it will tell us how much. So I might do high quality. Now, probably because I haven't done too much in a while, it's going to need to do some print priming before it will print. So yes, there's some print priming involved. Even though I'm not using white at all, it's going to have to prime the white just because when you start the day, it needs to prime the lines here and there if it hasn't been used in a while. So that's fine. It tells you how long it's going to take, 5.92 milli, 0.2. I mean, I could do, like I said, if I did probably standard, it would be like negligible in the CMYK somewhat. So we're going to do that, and we'll see how that turns out. So let's start it. And this will print, it has to do, see, it will say 7 minutes here because it's got to do that print priming first. And then it's going to move to the actual printing, which is 2 minutes, right? So, but like I said, you can tell it's priming. And then hopefully it will come out pretty good. And we can take it into the laser and cut it. Okay, we just finished printing it on the UV printer, and here it is. Here it is. It's a little bit hard to see with this camera, but there I think you can see it. The two patches and the registration marks or the targets. We'll now take it into the laser and cut it out. And that should be it. So that should be good. Okay, I've positioned the laser. I've already done the 2 points and prepared it for print and cut. And we've set the first and second targets, so next is going to be doing the cuts. So I'll turn on the air assist, which will be quite loud, but I'll turn on the air assist and we'll see what happens. As you can see, it's cutting the first one out. Let's see how accurate that is. It might be a little bit off because of our kerf and just trying to line things up. But it's pretty close, and hopefully it will work. So we finished with the laser, and it cut out, did the print and cut, and here's the close up of that. It's pretty close, It's a little bit off. You can see a little bit off. So what I would advise is maybe you do a little bit bleed over when you do in the Eufy, which is easy to do. You can bring it a little bit larger than 2.5, and I think the main reason why we saw that too is trying to get those targets for the print and cut and set those correctly can be a challenge, especially on my laser. The laser sits pretty low, so trying to see that beam from under the laser and see where it's touching, it's hard. And you have to manually lower the laser head. So I didn't want to raise it up and do it, because you could do it at a higher level and then put it down, but it's all manual. So the easiest thing for me was just to do it and kind of eyeball it. It might have been a little bit off, but your laser might vary. The more accurate you can get that, and I also chose no scaling, so it could be, and I'll do a test at some point, that it was accurate enough that it didn't need the scaling. I could have chose no scaling. Those are your two options. It doesn't really say no. One says no scaling and the other doesn't say anything, but I know the one that doesn't say no scaling is in case when you printed it, it's not exact, but it's supposed to do the math between the two target points to understand that. But I know sometimes it can be off if you don't choose no scaling, and it needs to be no scaling because it's accurate. So that's something to test and see. Does doing it from the Eufy Make, you need scaling or not scaling. But overall, I think it will work pretty well. It's not, like I said, this was a test, so I can try and do it differently and see how that goes. But I think it's pretty close. And like I said, just a little bit of overbleed you could do just to make sure that when it cuts, it will cut pretty close. And then even if it doesn't, you won't have the white. You'll have, a color that won't show that it's not cut correct. So hopefully you enjoyed this this video, and hopefully you can think about maybe adding a UV printer, a desktop to your laser business to do more things, to add color to things, to do hat patches, do tumblers, do other things that you can do color. So I hope this was helpful, and please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.
We are the enthusiasts.